Good afternoon, Keith Tebow back with you. It's been a little while since we spoke about what has been going on and happenings at the Bristol County House of Correction. And we're pleased to be joined by Sheriff Tom Hodgson from the Bristol County House of Correction. Sheriff Hodgson, how are you? Nice to see you again.
Keith, it's great to see you, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I know it's been a while, so I want to catch up on a few things if I could. The last time we spoke, I think was probably sometime in the summer, where we talked about, COVID cases at the jail and some ramifications of that. Just, give our audience a little bit of an update on what's been happening in terms of COVID at the Bristol County House of Correction, how the cases have been, and, how's the jail dealing with getting inmates vaccinated?
Well, first of all, thank you, Keith, again. And we, credit to my staff who have really done a phenomenal job with the control of COVID-19 within the facility. This is not a new sort of thing for us. We dealt with SARS and other sort of types of diseases that we have to contend with. But we had policies in place, and we added the CDC DPH regulations and guidelines to make sure that we were doing everything we could to minimize it, and we did. We had, I think, a total since last March of about 98 inmates total out of close to 900 who ended up being positive, all recovered. So that was good news. We had issues too with our staff, but again, all recovered and continuing to do everything we could to minimize it. Right now, it's my understanding we don't have any COVID cases, but we're still maintaining our protocols and distancing and all those kinds of things with the inmates and detainees here, as well as the staff. As far as vaccinations go, we're not yet at a point where we have the majority in either case, whether it's inmates or staff who have had the vaccine. It's still ongoing. We did notifications within the facility. We had videos to explain why the vaccination would be important for the inmates to access, and as well as our staff. But of course, everyone makes ultimately the choice for themselves on that health issue, which we obviously would not and could not mandate. So right now, I think we're somewhere close to 50% on our staff. We're about almost the same place with the inmates and detainees. So we're continuing to offer it. And I know the medical staff, when they're in the units every day, are sort of prodding and encouraging any inmates that haven't gotten it to take it. We all know, though, Keith, that part of the hesitation, I think, has to do with, reports that the vaccines weren't completely tested for a long period of time. We had one individual in our department who ended up getting Bell's palsy after the first one, and that, of course, makes people hesitate and pause. But once they realize that, based on the numbers, that it really has not been as big a concern in that regard, I think more and more people are going to be looking to access the vaccine.
Let me ask you, how about visitations for family members of those who are incarcerated? How has that changed? Are there still restrictions?
There are still restrictions. We have not opened up contact visits at this point. We are obviously still maintaining a pretty strict situation around that, as difficult as it is for us to do that. But I think the inmates all understand. They recognize it won't be forever. We initially, in the beginning, we gave them 2 free phone calls per week for every inmate and detainee. And then we went down to 1 phone call per detainee and inmate. And so right now we're getting ready to have laptop access for them, where they can actually do their own visits online. And we think that's going to be helpful until such time as we can return to normal visits under, a more safe circumstance.
Last March, in terms of, when the infections became a little more severe, there were some ICE detainees under your supervision that sued the jail There was an announcement this week that there could be a settlement in that case. Talk about your view of how that all came about and your thoughts on the potential settlement that was announced earlier this week.
Well, first of all, with regards to the settlement, it's important to point out that when the settlement happens, it will be clear that our position and the position of ICE is that we did nothing wrong and ICE did nothing wrong. In fact, the judge himself said in one of his responses with legal counsel during the case that he acknowledged that the Bristol County Sheriff's Office complied with all COVID restrictions and sanitation protocols by the CDC and by the DPH, which means that we were not deliberately indifferent. Even though that was something that the judge tried to suggest, even after saying that somehow we would be deliberately indifferent. And if you were to buy into that, you'd have to believe everybody in the United States that had any kind of a situation where they're dealing with staff or inmates or businesses, that everyone would be deliberately indifferent for following CDC and DPH guidelines. And I don't think the average person believes that that's the case. So there's no monetary settlement in this, and the really unfortunate part of all of it, Keith, is that when the judge started to entertain these cases by activist groups, at the time that they brought the suit, there were no COVID cases within the detention facility. There were none within that ICE detention facility. Yet they proceeded, and the judge started to release people, even though we had no cases. So, on this new frontier where people were trying to figure things out, I think sometimes they went beyond a conservative approach to try to suggest that, well, if I do this, then maybe nobody will get it. There's a greater chance they won't if I just let them out. But you're talking about people who, we have people in here who bombed police stations in Ireland. One guy in Great Britain who was convicted of assault, rape, armed robbery, was released. And these are people that have established dysfunctional criminal behaviors that we're putting back into our communities, who were supposed to be held for hearings for determinations of deportation.
Yeah. And in a related move in terms of the issue of immigration, you were part of a letter that was sent to President Biden this week, I believe over 270 sheriffs from across the country, showing your concern over the president's efforts to overturn some of former President Trump's executive orders in terms of immigration at our borders. Give our viewers, a summary of that letter, what it entailed, and your thoughts about how the country should do a better job on our southern border.
Yeah, the letter you're referring to is this letter here, where we had 275 sheriffs from around the country who signed on because they recognize that open borders don't work. In fact, we have been talking to both the Obama-Biden administration, his then undersecretary under Obama, who is the now Secretary of Homeland Security, Mayorkas. We had meetings in Washington with them, telling them what was happening by them not having moved quickly to provide security at the borders, build the wall, and do the things that ultimately the next administration, President Trump's administration, did, because he sat down with sheriffs from across the country and wanted to know specifically what policies need to be put in place, because we had our boots on the ground. We know what's going on. We see the victims. And so when we made that progress, having conferred with the Trump administration, and they moved and started building that wall and putting policies in place with Mexico and the Northern Triangle countries to keep these people from coming in, we saw light at the end of the tunnel. But when President Biden stepped in 2 days of taking office, the swipe of a pen, he wiped out the progress that was being made on our behalf and behalf of all the people who elected the sheriffs of this country to uphold the rule of law, keep our promise to maximize our ability to protect them, keep their families safe, their neighborhoods, and the nation safe. And I guess what's really the most outrageous and most frustrating situation for sheriffs is We know that President Biden, back in 1996, when he was a senator, he was well aware of how, illegal immigration was impacting our communities. And he, in fact, back then was even saying we need to have more deportations. Then as vice president, they were well aware of what was going on and what open borders meant to the citizens of this country that he and, at that time, President Obama promised to protect. Yet they moved forward with DACA and other kinds of programs. And we were seeing and continue to see problems with the drug cartels, human trafficking, sex trafficking escalating, and of course, threats to our national security with terrorists coming across the border. And so for President Biden to knowingly and recklessly decide in 2 days after taking office just to wipe it out, it clearly translates into his feelings that his political agenda, supporting the progressives within his party, were more important than the lives of the American people, all the angel moms and dads who lost their kids to criminally illegal aliens over the years was not important and a priority going forward for more potential angel moms and dads to become, to lose their loved ones. And also for the humanitarian crisis of the people who are going on this trek, these girls, the teenage girls, they estimate about 80 to 90% being raped by these coyotes from the time they leave their homes and start on the trek to get to the U.S. border, to a sheriff just yesterday, Sheriff Martinez out of Valverde County, Texas, who has 110 miles of border, saying, my 4 deputies have to patrol 110 miles of this border. 75% of our time is spent dealing with the illegal aliens rather, coming across the border, the drug cartels, the traffickers, and on and on and on. And I can only devote 25% to the people that elected me to protect our county. And as a result, he was saying just yesterday, I believe, or the day before, he and his deputies had to go to the Rio Grande and pull a body of a woman who was pregnant with 2 twins in her and who was at full term at the time, floating in the Rio Grande dead, having drowned, and her husband was right across the river on the Mexican side, floating and had drowned as well. These things are preventable when you don't encourage people to violate the laws of this country and follow the rules to get here, because otherwise they're going to come, and we know that, and he's known that, and his Secretary of Homeland Security knows it.
Yeah. I want to get into a couple of other issues, back here at home. First of all, how has the pandemic impacted what your office has done for quite a while in terms of, inmates giving back to the community, helping themselves, in terms of their restitution, in terms of, the events that you do in terms of local cleanups in our region? Is that going to resume anytime soon?
We've already begun over the last couple of months to resume that. We've been doing some graffiti removal. We'll be doing, helping get the baseball fields ready in the communities that are going to start up with baseball. The cemeteries, we just got a request today from some of the cemeteries to help get those cleaned up. Our litter crews getting ready to start back up again. So we're ready to get them back out into the community and maximize whatever resources we have to give back to the taxpayer for having to run and operate the prisons, and give them a chance to do some good things for good people and get them on a trajectory where when they leave here, they hopefully don't come back.
And finally, I know there's been some growth within the sheriff's office. I saw recently that there's been some new code officers inaugurated and installed recently. How does that help in terms of what you need to achieve there at the jail?
Well, it helps us a lot because, as you can imagine, with all the things that have been going on, with the talk of perhaps removing indemnity for law enforcement, it's more and more difficult to recruit people to come into these jobs because we're dealing with the worst of society, and we're more apt to have more dangerous situations where we have to restrain people and what have you. So people are saying, I don't want to lose my retirement. I don't want to lose my career for doing what I'm supposed to do and having people suggest somehow that I shouldn't have done it, even though I followed all of the requirements, all the standards of training. Even the police departments are having problems now recruiting, and that's a big threat to the people of our communities with regards to their public safety. So when we can get anybody on board to take on this challenging and probably one of the most rewarding jobs in the country, we're happy about it. And so we're gonna continue to do everything we can to pivot a little bit and look for other ways to recruit. But this is a great department to work for. I wouldn't trade my staff for any in the country. We've been nationally accredited twice, back to back, over 6 years. And believe it or not, it's very difficult to get 100% once, never mind twice. And that's what our staff had accomplished. And I'm so proud of them for what they've done in meeting the highest standards of the industry nationally.
All right, Sheriff Tom Hodgson, as always, thank you for joining me. I appreciate your time, and we'll talk again soon. Great. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me. God bless. Take care.
All right. And thank you for joining us here on FRC Media. I'm Keith Tebow. Have a great day.